Hello and welcome to the latest edition of CISO Point of View. I'm really excited to be joined by Marc Ashworth, the CISO of First Bank. Hey Marc, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Excellent, very well. Thanks for joining me. Marc, tell everyone a bit about who you are.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me here today. Marc Ashworth. I've been in the business in IT now for at least 30 years. I started back whenever what I think Windows 3.1 I think was the primary OS, and did development for many years, and eventually moved into networking and Windows Server management and deployments, and did a lot of deployments for Fortune 500 companies, and then settled into healthcare for a while, and then manufacturing and aerospace, and then eventually got into banking. Back in the early 2000s, I started off with a group of guys I was consulting with, and we became the first CISSPs in the state of Missouri. And so that was back in, I think, 2003, and we were doing some pen testing and audits and those sort of things. That got me my first taste of true, security related things. I mean, you always did it right, with the managing of systems, and you always had that there, but actually to focus on that. And then I eventually went in and got my CISM and C-Risk, and then to encourage one of my guys, we did Security Plus too, just to get him onto that, and I was like, okay, I'll get it before you did, and so it was a race, and I did. But I was in a testing mode at that time, so I can't fault him too much off of that. So, but and then eventually I was pretty much in IT management for about 15 years or more, but I was a hands-on manager, so I was not only managing the employees and strategy and talking to the boards and stuff, but I was also, actually deploying and maintaining and staying up late and all that sort of stuff. So, so that really, I think, helped me as I moved forward into security and into the CISO position with the bank, because I was, I had that real world experience. I could talk to the teams and know how long it takes to do something, what needs to be done, and whether it was from a coding aspect or from a system or networking aspect. So as I came on to First Bank, I had not only the security team, but then also the network services team. So I have network and security, and that's eventually has evolved. And over this past year, I now have several aspects of fraud, and then also physical security as well. So, so I've pretty much doubled my group, and the responsibilities have grown since then. So,
fantastic! Great introduction. So we're now a quarter into the year. And if I were to give you a crystal ball, Marc, and ask you for the top 1 or 2 predictions, security predictions for the remainder of the year, what do you think they'd be?
Yeah, so I think that a couple of the big ones are going to be more attacks on remote workers, and that's going to be in various flavors, whether it's from social media and doing and finding out who is working for a particular organization and starting to reach out to them directly, trying to attack their home networks, and then try to take over accounts and get access that way. The other thing is really it's going to be around fraud and scams, and that's going to lead into other areas such as ransomware and other forms of malware and penetrations within the environment. But there's just so many credentials that's out there right now that account takeovers, and which is going to lead into again, more ransomware. I see that growing. I don't see that stopping. And then some other forms of different types of attacks in different areas, not only in banking but in other groups as well.
Yeah, on the topic of ransomware, from your experience, what measures should banks be taking to prepare for the next ransomware event that perhaps they're not doing today?
Yeah, I think whether it's a bank or any institution, really, looking at your environment, getting down to those fundamentals. It's like everyone's looking for the one solution. There's not going to be one solution that's going to stop it. There's different layers that's going to help protect you. I think probably one of the best layers is probably application controls. So the application allow and deny listing, because it can control scripts and everything else. And Windows Defender's getting there with that, but they're not as good as a Carbon Black or a McAfee or, some of the other products that does application control, that looks at third-party softwares and scripting as well, and not just the OS related layer. I think it'll get there, but not quite yet. The other area is, you have to look at your environment and thinking of, okay, if something does get in, how can we reduce the risk of lateral movement? Because that's what's going to happen. And what we've, the trend for them, those attackers, they're not just deploying it right away. They're getting ingrained in your environment for, a few days, few weeks, whatever it might be. And so to be able to stop that lateral movement, which gets into segmentation and micro-segmentation and your identities and making sure that you have legacy protocols, all those sort of things off and controlled and reducing your risk is going to help lower your impact of ransomware. And then obviously backups as well, so having your backups, having offline backups, and being able to retrieve something offline, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for identities and they're looking for your backups to keep you from recovering.
And do you think organizations have a good grasp of where their crown jewels are located? Or do you think there's still some scratching of the heads?
I would hope so. I would hope that if you're a manufacturing company, that you have intellectual property or SCADA systems or, something along that line. If you're a bank, it's your core systems, it's where that PII, your bank accounts are. If you're a retail store, it's that PCI component and layers. And so I hope that people know that and then look at protecting that data and then moving out from there or building up from there to protect the organization and reduce the risk.
With more sophistication in the attacks, many of the conversations that I've been having in recent weeks and months is that CISOs are looking at extending the scope of vulnerability management from the outer perimeter, the outer layer, from the endpoints and the OS and the network into the core, inner core storage systems to try to stay one step ahead. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a necessity for 2021 to really detect and prioritize vulnerabilities within storage management systems?
Yeah, whether it's storage management or even just your regular environment, your patch management, vulnerability management program has to be, I won't necessarily say mature, but you have to have governance over that and an active program with that. And in the storage, if we just talk about storage management and whether it's a SAN or maybe an HCI cluster of some sort, VMware, Hyper-V, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But, protecting that management layer of those systems and being able to really isolate who has access to that and how they have access, whether it's a jump box or even as far as going with a separate Windows domain for authentication and segmentation. Segmentation at the minimal should be done at the network layer. But then also going deeper into that data and protecting that data with encryption and controlling those keys and being able to manage that and being able to manage who can enable shares or attach the storage or detach the storage. All that needs to be considered and make sure that that is really locked down. No default passwords, those sort of areas.
Let's move on and talk a bit about automation. Now, automation is not a new trend, but it seems to have taken on a new meaning or a new level of importance, whether it's automating scanning, detection, prioritizing vulnerabilities, and ultimately helping free up time. We see the security teams who are overworked and struggling for time. What role do you think automation will play throughout the remainder of 2021 and onwards?
I think it's going to depend on the pricing because, there's some great solutions out there, but it's very expensive to get that going. There's other systems that might be built into your SIM that might allow for more cost-effective automation, triggering off of various alerts and doing different processes, kicking off different API calls. Maybe running an antivirus scan or locking the machine down because of detecting something. So the volume of it, I think it's going to increase some, especially as we continue with this battle of having not a lot of resources available from a staffing model. So, something has to give, and that automation is a good way to make that up and help reduce some loads and some of the fatigue. But it's knowing your environment to be able to do that, and to if you have a smaller environment with good security controls in place, you might not have a lot of events that takes place that you need that automation, those reoccurring things. But in a larger environment, 20, 30, 40,000 devices or more, yeah, I could see regular events where automation is going to kick in. You can really take care of a lot of things very quickly and reduce that strain and load on your SOC and help desk and other environments. So it's really going to depend on the environment. It's going to depend on the cost of it and what solution that you have in place. And you can always create, just general scripting or scheduled task or something to go out and check things and react. But then that might not be fast enough from a security event standpoint.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about strategy. So how important is it to build a mature cybersecurity strategy from the ground up?
I don't know necessarily from the ground up. I would hope that there's some form, even in an older company that might not have a dedicated security team, but I would hope that there is security principles and practices and policies that's in place there already. Now, from a new company, obviously, building that security strategy from day one would be very good and having it ingrained, but usually security is backtracked because of the trying to get the initial product out the door or to grow the company and not having the right staffing off of there. But to me as a CISO, it's very important. And in the banking industry where it's highly regulated and other industries like that, it's very important because the boards are looking at that and wanting to know what are we doing? What am I doing to reduce the risk in the organization? What am I doing to keep abreast of what threats are out there affecting the organization, and then making sure that where we're moving towards is a good security model. And you have all these audits and regulations that's taking place that's getting reviewed. So that gives you, at least in banking, that gives you a good set on where you're at. And from a compliance, and even though compliance and security is not necessarily hand in hand, you should be above compliance levels, but at least having that as your baseline to where then you can work off of from your maturity level. If you're getting a lot of dings on the audits, then those are areas of improvements and where you need to go with from there. And then from once you have a good stable environment, then you can go into those other level 4, level 5 areas of maturity from a CIS top 20 or a CSET type of standard.
Yeah. So against the backdrop of COVID, what do you think are the newer and additional responsibilities that fell on the shoulders of the CISO?
Really trying to manage the risk around those work from home people, those remote workers, and looking at your environment and the risks that you have out there for there, and is everything locked down that the way it needs to be, or if not, are you at least able to monitor it? And if you can't determine those gaps, and then trying to get a solution in place to where you can monitor and control that as much as possible. Education and awareness is going to be another big component of those remote workers, and making sure that they are aware of what's going on. And then back to that vulnerability management and patch management, if you are not already on an always on type VPN connectivity or some solution like that, or VPNless, then how are you patching and checking for those systems? And that's where really, looking at your management, your vulnerability management, and maybe breaking up systems in tiers in order to prioritize your patching and your vulnerabilities. So that way you better know which direction to go and which ones, and having SLAs tied to those if possible.
Yeah. Finally, what are your best tips for CISOs to get a seat at the table and to secure boardroom investment?
Well, it's about trust, right? So if you're new or if it's a new CISO position, is really gaining trust of the executives, which will then get you that seat at the board, or at least get you to the point of being able to speak to the board and educate the board. And really it becomes education, because if they're not technical, to not get them technical, but at least put it in terms that they can. And then also around the business need of it, how does security affect business, and how can you either help progress it or help with the branding of the business to make sure that you're able to provide benefit from that route. That, okay, yeah, we can't, from the organization, we're not going to be a cost, or we're not going to be a profit center from a security standpoint, but here's the soft benefits of a good security program to, from a customer's trust and relationship and those aspects, and you're able to bring that up into value within the organization.
Amazing. Marc, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.